Okay, so this was question 16. We're still on Article 2. This was CPLR 202. Question is, select the correct statement as to cause of action accruing outside New York State. A, it must be commenced in all instances within the time limited by the laws of the state where the cause of action accrued. B, if the plaintiff is a New York resident, the action must be commenced both within the time limited by the laws of New York and the laws of the state where the cause of action accrued. C, if the cause of action accrues in favor of a resident of New York State, then the time limited by the laws of New York State where the cause of action accrued does not apply. D, if the cause of action accrues against a resident of this state, then only the time limited by the laws of this state shall apply. And the answer is C. This is CPLR 202. Is designated to prevent forum shopping by non-residents with regard to causes of action accruing outside New York State. Thus, when a cause of action accrues in favor of a non-resident outside New York State, it must be timely both under the laws of New York State and the state where the cause of action accrued if the non-resident wants to use New York's courts. Where the cause of action accrues in favor of a New York resident, the cause of action only has to be timely under the New York law. Thus, C is the correct answer. So let's talk about what this is about, because it says it right here. It's to prevent forum shopping. Forum shopping is basically when somebody outside of New York State wants to use the courts of New York State because it would be an advantage of them the way the structure of the state laws are working and are put together. It would be of benefit to them, whereas if they did it in their own state, they would have less of an edge. So they do this to prevent it. So what this is saying is that either side, either that when they're a non-resident, which is without the state, means it's like outside of the state. So if they're a non-resident, the decision, the cause of action, like being in favor, would have to be timely. The statute of limitations would have to work under both their state laws and the state laws of New York. So because what happens is, like, if they're using New York courts because the person that they're suing is in New York State, they're not going to get the same preference as a New Yorker because a New Yorker is a resident of New York State, but they are not. A good example of this was the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. Like, they're obviously both from California, but I believe he ended up starting the case in West Virginia. And the reason he did that was because it favored him in the sense that he couldn't have had cameras in California, I believe, in the court system, but yet he wanted those cameras in West Virginia. He wanted to, whether or not he was going to win the case or not, for him, it was about clearing his name. And he knew that if the public could view the trial, that they would, in public opinion, whether or not he won or lose, that they would side with him because, I mean, I don't know, like, if he was telling the truth or not, but, you know, that's whatever. He ended up winning most of the case. But the point was that it was important for him, for people to see and watch what was going on. And he had that edge in West Virginia. He was able to get that. Whereas in California, he was not. So New York that would be forum shopping, right? You're shopping for a forum that's going to work in your favor. And so in this case, it worked out for Johnny Depp, but he couldn't have done that in New York State because of this law, because of CPLR 202, that is there to prevent forum shopping. Okay, so I want to read the actual CPLR for 202 because this is really about commencement of an action and it's about statute of limitation, right? This whole article, Article 2, is about statute of limitation. So cause of action accruing without the state. What that means is that something happened outside of New York State. Whatever happened, whatever the case is based on, happened outside of New York. So anytime you see without the state, it's outside of New York State. And this is saying accruing. Accruing is, in other words, at the time that that happens. So let's say I'm from New York and I'm driving to Vermont and I get into a car accident or something happens. Let's just say car accident, right? I get into a car accident, something happens in Vermont that's without the state. So accruing means from the time that that accident happened, from that accruing, right? So that's the beginning point, the commencement point. Accruement is the commencement point of the statute of limitation, right? Remember accruing to interposition, that whole terminology. If you didn't get to that yet, it's somewhere in Article 2. I don't know exactly where yet, but anyway, so interpose is the time where you actually file the case, but accruing is when the incident actually happens. So accruing without the state. So this happened to me. I'm from New York. I went to Vermont. Sorry, I can't get my states right. I went to Vermont. I just want to go everywhere, but this example will use Vermont. I don't know what the hell their statute of limitations are. I'm just trying to get these, but let's read the rest of it. An action based upon a cause of action accruing without the state cannot be commenced after the expiration of the time limited by the laws of either the state or the place without the state where the cause of action accrued. Let's stop there. So it's saying that, let's say the person that wants to sue is the person in Vermont and not me from New York State. They want to commence. They're not from New York State, but they're looking to see if they want to start the case in New York State. They read this and they're like, okay, this isn't going to work in my favor, so why travel all the way to New York? Because basically, let's say that they have 30 days to commence the case in Vermont under their laws, and they have 60 days in New York, but they're not a resident of New York. So they don't get to take advantage of those extra 30 days because they're not from New York. So if a New Yorker, let's say I want to start the case, I can use, and I want to start the case, I look at Vermont's laws and I look at my laws and I say, well, hell, I got an extra 30 days to start this case because there's 60 days in New York, but it's 30 days in Vermont. So hell yeah, I'm going to start the case. It's of my advantage to start this case in New York and not in Vermont where the action accrued, right? So that's what it's saying. It's saying this is all about commencement of the action of something that happened outside of the state of New York. The incident happened outside of New York, right? So if the Vermont person wanted to commence the action, it would not help them to start it in New York because it's of no benefit to them. You know, they don't get to take advantage of the 60 days statute of limitation. Only the New Yorker would be able to take advantage of that. Okay, so let's go on. Except that where the cause of action, and here it is, accrued in favor of a resident of the state, the time limited by the laws of the state shall apply. So it's more, if it's going to be more beneficial to the New Yorker to file that case in New York because it's of their benefit. Like New York's got to look out for New York. Vermont's got to look out for Vermont. It would be of no benefit for that Vermonter to come down to New York and start a case here, you know, because the time to commence the action is only 30 days in Vermont, and they don't get to take advantage of the 60 days in New York to start. And that's not the law, by the way. I don't know what the hell it is. I'm just giving you an example. So keep that in mind. Okay, so hope that makes sense.